Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Andrew Kirchhoff, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we're going to be talking about my Week 13 waiver wire targets for the 2019 fantasy football season. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about waiver wire targets at the running back, wide receiver, quarterback, tight end, and defensive positions going into Week 13. Yes, this is the final week of the regular fantasy football season prior to getting into Weeks 14, 15, and 16, which is the fantasy football playoffs. So it's extremely vital to go ahead, go out, and make some waiver wire additions that is going to make a difference for your roster to help you win a fantasy championship this season. Before we begin today's video, let me remind all of you, if you have not yet already, click that subscribe button, join the community, get that cursor past Stephon Gilmore, cornerback of the New England Patriots. Click that subscribe button. Maybe run a slant route, a 9 route, a post corner, get it done. Subscribe to the channel. Help us get to that 13,000 subscriber mark. Also, for those of you who haven't already done so, click that bell notification button to stay up to date on my latest content. Sunday mornings, 8:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Live streams. Might have a live stream this Thursday. We'll talk about it in a little bit. Again, if you like today's video, don't forget to click the like button. All right. Hey, everybody. How's it going? We're in the Rams. We're probably going to lose today to the Ravens, but so be it. Okay. Before we begin, like we usually do, we talk about some news around the National Football League. There are a lot of, pieces of information in terms of Week 12 review and or Week 13 injuries that may be taking place that could potentially hurt or help your cause. Starting off at number 1, Eric Ebron has been sent to the injured reserve. He is done for the season. Therefore, Jack Doyle will be the number 1 tight end waiver wire selection of the week. We'll talk about him in a little bit. But in terms of targeting the tight end position, we all know that the Indianapolis Colts love to use 3 tight end sets. Just this past week on Thursday Night Football, if you go back and you watch that game, they use a formation many times in which they have Jack Doyle, Eric Ebron, and Mo Alley-Cox in the formation in a bunch set. They will always use tight end. They will always target the tight end position because of their lack of wide receiver depth. So, obviously, Eric Ebron going out rises Jack Doyle on boards, and he should be a great top 12 tight end play every single week from here on out, considering their schedule and everything. So, it should be good for him. Outside of that, in terms of other injuries, Hunter Renfrow of the Oakland Raiders this past Sunday against the Jets, they got blown out, probably one of the most disappointing performances of Week 12 as a whole as a team. Unfortunately, he broke a rib, punctured his lung. He's going to be out for quite some time, which is really unfortunate considering he was having a pretty good rookie year and helping this team in his contributions. It's pretty major. Outside of that, they don't really have anybody else that can step up. Zay Jones hasn't done anything. So maybe somebody else with a lesser name can step up and play that little slot role. But as of right now, it's not looking great. And then the last piece of information, Andy Dalton is going to be the starting quarterback of the Cincinnati Bengals in Week 13. So the Bengals organization thought, we're tanking a little too hard. We've lost 11 times this season, and the chances are we're probably not going to win another game unless we put in another quarterback. In order to basically save themselves the embarrassment, they're going to play Andy Dalton. Hopefully AJ Green returns, and we can finally have a reemergence of this Bengals offense. Again, the Bengals have a very easy schedule in the coming weeks. Obviously, Week 15 against the New England Patriots isn't fun, but the other games, Week 13, 14, and 16, are very easy matchups. And if Andy Dalton is going to be the remaining quarterback for the rest of the season, Tyler Boyd, Auden Tate, Alex Erickson, if those 3 are the wide receivers, they all get boosts. AJ Green coming back would give himself a boost. And Joe Mixon has been playing well, and hopefully the offense can continue to give them the ball. The Bengals, not a bad option there. It's definitely trending in the right direction with the quarterback change. Those are all the pieces of information that we've been given here on Monday. Let's talk about some waiver wire targets for Week 13 at the running back position, starting off with number 1, Jonathan Williams. He was the number 1 waiver wire running back I mentioned last week. He had an amazing Thursday Night Football game when he touched the ball 29 times. He had 26 rushing attempts, 3 targets, 3 receptions. I don't remember a time where a running back that could just on one week win the job due to an injury, come out and touch the ball almost nearly 30 times. It's incredible, and it's exciting because for those of you who ended up picking up a guy like Jonathan Williams, well, he's already paying dividends because he had a monster 20-point week in Week 13 in half-point PPR scoring formats, which is absolutely fantastic, and it's going to continue, in my opinion. This is a great offensive line. This is an offense that is trying to make the playoffs, so they're going to put forth a great effort every single week. I don't know when Marlon Mack's going to return. They haven't sent him to the IR for a reason. It's because they have playoff hopes. I don't think Marlon Mack plays, until maybe even Week 16, maybe later. So as of right now, Jonathan Williams, again, only owned in 63% of fantasy leagues, should be owned by every single one of your leagues. Is a great starting running back at the moment, even with splitting some snaps with Nyheim Hines. He's a great play. He's my number one. Moving on to number two, Rashaad Penny. Rashaad Penny, we talked about Rashaad Penny a lot this offseason, and we talked about him potentially coming in and having a 50-50 role with Chris Carson, but unfortunately, that has not been the case. Throughout the entire year, he really has been underutilized, injured, and or just a below par play. This past week, with the complications of the handoff, the fumble issues that Chris Carson has had, Rashaad Penny was really given an opportunity. Chris Carson, this past week, only touched the ball 8 times on the ground for 26 yards. He had 4 catches for 4 receptions for 31. That's beautiful. But he, unfortunately, caused or forced, him and Russell Wilson, that handoff was a little bit of a mess. But the blame does go on Chris Carson. Therefore, Rashaad Penny came in on 14 rushing attempts against one of the best run-stopping defenses, had 129 rushing yards and a touchdown. Obviously, a big run made a difference, but all in all, he's really put his name in the hat in terms of, hey, I can contribute to this team. We're trying to make a run, and we can absolutely do so, and you can use my services. So going forward, from what I heard with Pete Carroll, he obviously wants to keep Chris Carson as the number one, but it's looking towards more of maybe a 60-40 split in the coming weeks. So that's definitely going to increase the value of Rashaad Penny. And if, in fact, Carson wants to fumble again, he's going to fumble away his career. So Rashaad Penny, not a bad pickup. Moving on. Bo Scarborough. We talked about him last week as well. Running back for the Detroit Lions. This guy had 98 rushing yards this past week. Unfortunately, fumbled the ball. But again, this is going to be a guy that in the coming weeks is going to run the ball hard, and he's going to be the hammer for this offense. And he's going to put the hammer down. Unfortunately, this is not a guy that's going to get any work in the passing game. He's not going to have the upside of any receptions, and that's unfortunate. But in a standard league where this guy's only owned in 43% of leagues, Yahoo-wide as of right now, I would absolutely suggest you guys go out. Again, 18 touches. That's fantastic. That's kind of touch counts that Le'Veon Bell had 12 rushing attempts. Ronald Jones had 12 rushing attempts. Alvin Kamara, 12 rushing attempts. These are guys that, Kareem Hunt, 8. Tevin Coleman, 11. Jamal Williams, 11. Miles Sanders, 12. This is a guy that is getting a lot of touches and needs to be respected in terms of his value. And I think he's not a bad play going forward. Moving on, number 4, Benny Snell Jr. All right, so here's the issue. We all thought, going into week 13, it's all Jalen Samuels, right? Jalen Samuels has been the backup to James Conner this whole year. He has contributed heavily in the absence of James Conner. So why be any different in week 12? Well, that wasn't the case. Benny Snell, coming off his knee injury, which he had surgery a couple weeks to recover, similar to Jalen Samuels a couple weeks prior, came in and pretty much dominated the running game. The dude had the ball and ran the ball 21 times for 98 yards, 1 reception for 5 yards, and had himself a pretty big performance against the Cincinnati Bengals. Sure, the Cincinnati Bengals, they're terrible against the run, but who would have thought a guy like Benny Snell was going to come out and pretty much absorb all of the work? Even, Jalen Samuels didn't even really see work until maybe like second quarter. There was another running back. So Snell, I think it was White, and then Samuels. In that order, were running the ball. It's pretty unfortunate. But again, if James Conner's out, Benny Snell looks to be the starting running back of this team as of right now. Moving on, number 5. All right, so this is a combination of LeSean McCoy and Darrel Williams of the Kansas City Chiefs. If, in fact, Damian Williams, the starting running back, is injured, we know that he got injured in that Monday night game in Mexico City against the Chargers, had a rib injury. If, in fact, he's out again playing against the Raiders, we've seen, just even from that Monday night game, just how valuable the running back spot or the starting running back spot for this team is. LeSean McCoy had a rushing touchdown, so did Darrel Williams. Both of these guys could be of value this coming week if Damian is out. Moving on to the last option, Qadree Ollison. Okay, so here's the thing. I almost said Quadre Diggs because there's a guy named Quandre. It doesn't matter, regardless. Ollison. Here's the thing. Of the running backs in this Atlanta backfield, Devontae Freeman's injured, Brian Hill's terrible, and Ollison continues to steal touchdowns. Each of the last 2 weeks has had a touchdown, averaging maybe like 6 carries per game. Not great, but he gets in the end zone, and that's really all that matters. I wanted to bring him up because really there's nobody else to pick up because a lot of people are already picked up in leagues, and the rest of the guys just don't really have too much value as of right now in terms of fantasy production. So as of right now, Ollison, not a bad option. You could pick up a guy like Nyheim Hines if you play in a full PPR, but he's not getting much work when Jonathan Williams is touching the ball 30 times a game. All right, let's go ahead and move on. Let's talk about the wide receiver waiver wire targets for week 13. Starting off with my number 1, A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown really in the last 5 weeks has not been terrible. He's been a decent wide receiver with the quarterback switch, which is absolutely not too much of a surprise. In the last couple of weeks, has been seeing more of a target count and at least being more proactive in terms of his production. 8 targets, 6 receptions, 64. The following game had a touchdown on 2 receptions. The following game, 7 for 4 for 81. And then obviously the Kansas City game was his worst performance. And then they went to the bye. And once coming off of this bye week, 5-4, 135 and 1. He had a huge week against the Jacksonville Jaguars, which is absolutely fantastic. It all is contributed to the production of a guy like Derrick Henry setting up play action, and then Ryan Tannehill taking advantage of it. A.J. Brown's schedule upcoming: Indianapolis, Oakland, Houston, New Orleans. Pretty good schedule. Hopefully can at least finish off strong for this season, and I think he's going to be able to do so. That's why he's my number 1. Moving on. Robby Anderson. So in terms of Robby Anderson's performances this year, this was really his most relevant performance. Now, you could go and point back at that Dallas Cowboys performance in which he had over 125 receiving yards and a touchdown, but the fact of the matter is nobody played him in that week. Not a single soul played him. If you did, it's because you didn't check your lineup and you forgot he was in there. Really, that's the case. Because Robby Anderson has not been good all season long. Unfortunately, that is the case. And this is finally where he's kind of getting more work. And this is exactly what we want to see, because a guy like Robby Anderson, we know, is a good wide receiver. He's only owned in 53% of leagues, has scored a touchdown each of the last 2 weeks. This past week, 4 receptions for 86 yards. Plays Cincinnati and Miami in the next 2 weeks. We know exactly how valuable that can be. Robby Anderson, not a bad pickup. Moving on, Randall Cobb for the 3rd week in a row has continued to prove why he is so valuable for this Cowboys offense. When Amari Cooper's out there not catching a single pass for the entire game, Randall Cobb has come in the last 4 weeks, 8 targets, 7 targets, 7 targets. Continues to be a great contributor for this offense. 4 for 86 this week, a 10-point play against a tough defense in a weather game. Randall Cobb in the coming weeks should continue to play well. And the matchups truly aren't that difficult, so he should be fine. He's another good waiver wire pickup with only he's only owned in, goodness gracious, 30% of leagues. Moving on, James Washington, a guy that we mentioned last week, similar to Randall Cobb. Here's the thing. James Washington's going to get the opportunity if Juju's going to miss time with that knee concussion protocol injury. Deontay Johnson's not a great player as of yet. I mean, he's had some pretty good performances, but he's not a difference maker. He's not a guy that needs the ball. At least we have more experience from a guy like James Washington. We know that Vance McDonald's not catching the ball. We know that James Conner might not come back for a while. James Washington has proven in the last 3 weeks that he's going to continue to improve. He's going to continue to produce. And he's not a bad option going forward. Again, obviously, he caught 1 pass and went for a huge amount of yards, but at least as of late, his target count has increased. 6'4", 7'5'7". It's going in the right direction. He's at least had good yard counts. 69, 90, 49, 98. Those are good yard counts. And it's all trending in the right direction. Hopefully Hodges can help this offense out. He's my number 4 option. Moving on to number 5, Cole Beasley. A guy that I've mentioned almost every single week. I think Cole Beasley, underutilized and undervalued by a lot of people. If you need a 10-point flex option, like a James White, a guy that is going to get you like 10 points, even though James White really shit the bed this past week because really he didn't play. A guy like Cole Beasley, not a bad option in my eyes. I feel like his production and obviously his target count this past week, 9 for 6, 76 and 1. That's ridiculous. And on top of it, revenge game at Dallas this week. Sounds like a recipe for success for me. I like the idea. Thursday night should be fun. I think Cole Beasley is going to have a pop-off game. Moving on, Dede Westbrook. Number 6, is it a surprise Dede Westbrook had a big week? No. Why? Well, because Dede Westbrook's the slot receiver for this team, and Nick Foles loves to throw to the slot position. Threw 9 times for 8 receptions, 69 yards, exactly what we want to see, and is exactly what we're going to continue to see for the rest of the season. Dede's my number 6. Moving on to number 7, Anthony Miller, a guy that last week I considered putting on the list, but I thought to myself, I'm going to give him one more week, and if in fact he continues to produce, we're going to mention him. In the last 2 weeks, he has had 11 targets and 9 targets for this Chicago Bears offense that honestly he's had some pretty easy games. Now, has he produced? Sure. 6 receptions, 54, 6 receptions, 77. In a full PPR, it's great. Half PPR, it's a decent flex play, wide receiver 3 play with potential upside, because this is a guy that last year caught, I think if I'm not mistaken, 6-8 touchdowns, something like that. And really can be a contributor for this offense that we have not seen him be all season long. Hasn't caught a touchdown this year. Had a huge, rookie year, but hopefully we're going to get to a point where we're feeding the ball to Anthony Miller. That's what I'm hoping. We have been in the last 2 weeks. 20 targets in the last 2 weeks. Beautiful. The last wide receiver option, N'Keal Harry. From what I heard, obviously Julian Edelman still getting 10 targets per game. That is not a surprise. But Mohamed Sanu is, in fact, what I heard, because reports conflicting. Could be, there's some reports that say, George Kittle has a broken ankle and somehow played through it. And then there are some reports saying that he's perfectly fine. And then somehow he comes out and he has a monster game. Not really, that's a different conversation. But the whole point is Mohamed Sanu supposedly is going to miss a couple weeks. I don't know. Is that 100%? I'm not certain. But as of right now, if in fact he's not playing this week, the playing against the Texans is not a bad option for N'Keal Harry. Just saying, it could be a good pickup. All right, let's go ahead and move on. Let's talk about tight ends for Week 13. Starting off with number 1, like I mentioned earlier in the video, Jack Doyle. Without a doubt in my mind, Jack Doyle is going to see a lot of targets. This is an offense that loves to feed the tight end position, and it is going to go in his direction a lot. I love Jack Doyle in this specific instance, and I think he's going to have a successful rest of season. Moving on to number 2, Kyle Rudolph, coming off of a bye week. Again, like I've mentioned in the past, 5 touchdowns in the last 5 weeks. This is a guy that should not be undervalued and should be picked up in many leagues. This is an offense that also uses the tight end position a lot. Doesn't target them very often, but uses them a lot in the running game so that when play action opens up, Kyle Rudolph always scoring in the red zone. Moving on. Ryan Griffen, number 3. Ryan Griffen was just given a huge contract the other day, extension, because he was going to be a free agent after the season. This is a guy that came over from the Texans last year, has had a 1-year resurgence of his career, really has contributed heavily for this offense. And just this past week, or in the last 2 weeks, scored a touchdown. And he's been pretty good. So again, Ryan Griffen, not a bad pickup. Hopefully you picked him up last week like we mentioned. Moving on. Again, he's only owned in 44% of leagues, but maybe you're not really worried about tight end. Moving on. Mike Gesicki, a guy that's also not really owned in many leagues, 15%. Has seen a pretty good streamline of targets, 6, 6, 6, and 7. This past week, the gunslinger Ryan Fitzpatrick was able to find him in the red zone. Big target out of Penn State. This is a good tight end. He was good. They just have underutilized him. He needs to get more work in the red zone. Hopefully that's the case coming weeks. Moving on to number 5, Dallas Goedert. Goedert, again, another guy that's getting a lot of targets at the tight end position. 8 for 7, 32 yards. Unfortunately, fumbled the ball. That is not great, but he's getting targets. And if this offense continues to stay injured with Alshon Jeffrey and Nelson Aguilar, Jordan Howard, Lane Johnson, there's a lot of pieces injured for this Eagles offense. Wentz is going to have to continue to rely upon his tight end position, which he has this year. All right, moving on. The last tight end I wanted to mention is Noah Fant. Noah Fant, unfortunately, this past week had a tough sled of a matchup. The Buffalo Bills give up the least points to opposing tight ends, or I think the second fewest points to opposing tight ends in the National Football League. They are really locked down. Those linebackers do not mess around. So Noah Fant, sure, he may have struggled, but I still think this is a guy that if you were looking for a backup tight end that could have an explosive second half, not a bad option. I think he's a pretty good player, to be honest. All right, let's go ahead and talk about quarterbacks going into Week 13. A lot of valuable names here because, again, there are a lot of quarterbacks in the entire landscape that are terrible. Like Matt Ryan is washed. I really do believe that. This year, Matt Ryan looks terrible. And there are so many other quarterbacks right now that are having so much better years. And there are a lot of guys to the left of me that truly should be played over him every single week. And I'm sorry for even suggesting him anymore. Like, it's done. Rodgers looks like trash too. So those guys, we're done with it. We're moving on. So as of right now, someone wants to call me, and I don't want to pick up the phone. Moving on. We have Ryan Tannehill as my number 1. The guy finishes the number 1 quarterback this week. Not really by accident, but because of, just his willingness to, get after it. 7 rushes for 40 yards, 2 touchdowns on the ground, on top of Derrick Henry having a monster performance, and then him being able to get his other wide receivers into into the game, get him. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, Adam Humphries had a pretty good game. Let me see here. What did Mr. Humphries do this week? I mean, I'm pretty sure he got Adam Humphries going. Nope, didn't. All right, let's go ahead and move on. Anyway, Ryan Tannehill should be good. I mean, his upcoming schedule is pretty damn easy. Indianapolis, Oakland, Houston, New Orleans. Seems like a pretty good schedule there. They've been 4-1 with Ryan Tannehill as a starting quarterback. Looking in the right direction. Moving on, number 2. Speaking of the guy who finishes the number 2 quarterback on the week, Sam Darnold, wrong one. Moving on, the whole point is this guy has scored 3 touchdowns each of the last 2 weeks, if I'm not mistaken, right? He had 4 touchdowns in week 11, 3 touchdowns this past week. In the last 3 weeks, the Jets offense has scored 34 points. I understand they had a pick 6. Actually, technically, the Jets offense scored like 28 points each of the last 3 weeks, okay? Whatever. They've had a couple good defensive plays, but regardless, Sam Darnold's been very good. Plays Cincinnati and Miami in the coming weeks. Those are really easy matchups. I really want to invest in that. The number 3 quarterback may have been Jameis Winston this week, but the number 4 was Baker Mayfield, and he's going to be on this list today because, like I've mentioned in the past, Baker Mayfield is very much so a decent quarterback because of his schedule. His schedule coming up, I mean, we talked about this weeks ago. When you get to play against Miami, Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, and then Arizona in the coming weeks, seems like an easy task at hand. And hopefully, with Jarvis Landry popping off, Odell Beckham having a good game, Kareem Hunt scoring his first touchdown as a Brown, Nick Chubb with 100 yards in the ground, this offense is really rolling, and it's hopefully going to go and continue to keep pace. Moving on. Nick Foles is my number 4 because Nick Foles, despite not having a great game, not completing a touchdown pass, plays against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers this week, a defense that gives up some of the most points to opposing quarterbacks. I understand Matt Ryan washed, but Nick Foles is a little bit different. He will be able to score touchdowns, and I express my concern a little bit here and there because there's always a potential that Leonard Fournette has another one of these big games and steals touchdowns. But Nick Foles should be fine. I expect him to be decent. All right, moving on. Number 5. So here's the thing about Ryan Fitzpatrick. He's a gunslinger. We know that. Some weeks he'll have 40. Some weeks he'll have 2. Some weeks he'll have 12. But in weeks 14, 15, and 16, he has the Jets, the Giants, and the Bengals. I kind of want to have him as my backup quarterback in those weeks. Because worst case scenario, my starter goes out. At least I have the gunslinger to believe in. And I believe in Fitzmagic. So he's my number 5. Moving on to the last quarterback I wanted to mention. Kyle Allen finishes the number 5 quarterback in 6-point per passing touchdown league formats. And that's because he scored 3 touchdowns with 0 interceptions against one of the best defenses in the National Football League. It's insane how well he played. He outperformed Drew Brees in fantasy. That's insane. And to be honest, hopefully he continues to stay with it because he plays Washington this week, and that is a very easy matchup. So I'm hoping he plays Washington, continues to stay on par, and then in the following week has a revenge game against Atlanta. Should be good. Moving on, let's talk about the last position for Week 13 waiver wire targets, the defensive position. Now, we talked about the Eagles defense weeks ago, and the Eagles defense has a very easy schedule upcoming. They get to play against Miami, they get to play against the Giants, the Washington Redskins, and the Dallas Cowboys. The Philadelphia Eagles this past week, 11 points in fantasy, 6 sacks on Russell Wilson, got the fumble recovery, got an interception. They only allowed 17, 13, and 14 points in the last 4 weeks. This is a better defense, and they are trying to lock in for playoff mode. Hopefully, they stay healthy, but their defense, they've been playing better. Not a bad pickup. Moving on. They get to play against it's the Carolina Panthers playing against the Washington Redskins. Again, I think Dwayne Haskins is going to struggle. Sure, he picked up a first win when he took some selfies with people, but I think Carolina's pass rush is going to get after him, and they're going to cause some turnovers. So I think Carolina's a bad pickup for the defensive positions. Moving on, we'll talk about the Jets defense because the Jets defense, as of late, has been incredible. In the last 3 weeks, 16, 9, and 18. Obviously, they've played bad teams, but again, I don't think the Cincinnati Bengals is a good team, even with Andy Dalton. He is very much capable of throwing interceptions, and I think the Jets defense, not a bad play this week. Moving on. Chargers coming off a bye week, playing against Denver. Denver and their inexperienced quarterback. If the Los Angeles Chargers can just lock down and stop the running game, they will be able to force Brandon Allen to make mistakes, and I think the Chargers will be able to do so. They are not a bad defense this week. Moving on, the New Orleans Saints, my number 5, playing against the washed Matt Ryan. I'm done. I'm done with Matt Ryan. And I want to play defenses against him because he cannot get it done. And it's sad that he can't. But it's just it's the reality of the situation as of right now. We're not pulling out, any hidden gems right now, but it is the reality of the situation that a guy like Matt Ryan, not throwing a touchdown, going 23 for 46, 50% passing completion percentage against Tampa Bay, that's embarrassing. And I don't mind playing the Saints defense this week on Thursday Night Football. Moving on, the last option. Kansas City, coming off of a bye week, probably available. If, in fact, they can take advantage of what exactly the Jets did the other day to the Raiders and do that again and pretty much re-implement exactly what that defense did, they could find some success. This is a defense that when they want to play well can, and they're capable of doing so, especially at home. So I expect Kansas City to be a decent play. Those are my waiver wire targets for Week 13. Tomorrow, we'll talk running backs and tight ends because Thursday night there are 3 games. And as of right now, we'll probably do running backs and tight ends tomorrow, quarterbacks and wide receivers on Wednesday. Thursday, might do a live stream. We'll figure that out by Wednesday because I might be busy, stuff like that, holiday, out with family, etc. There are no bye weeks this week, so everyone's good to go. So it should be fun. And this is the first time in a while there haven't been bye weeks. So there's going to be a lot of names, and it's going to be really hard to rank them. So we might have some extended rankings. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But again, thank you for watching. If you liked today's video, click that subscribe button. If you haven't already, click that like button. And until tomorrow, talking about running backs, I'll see you guys. Peace.